Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive to the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. For watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be heading over to the Mountain West Conference and taking a look at the New Mexico Lobos, who finished 5-7 in 2024. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game on April 18th. We have a special guest joining us today. He has been at the Daily Lobo, the Albuquerque Journal, the KMNML Albuquerque Sports Radio, and CBS Sports. He is the co-founder of the Pit Press covering New Mexico athletics. He is Ryan Tomari. Ryan can be found on X at Ryan Tomari. And the Pit Press can be found on X at the Pit Press NM. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Quite the introduction. I normally never get that. It's usually you suck, the Mets suck, or the Knicks suck. So I appreciate that.
No problem. Hey, for those who are just turning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering New Mexico football?
I had somebody comment on your YouTube channel last year that I talked way too much, so I'm gonna even talk more this year. My comedic spirit god is Bill Murray as Peter Venkman in Ghostbusters, so you know where my sense of humor lies. I pursued print journalism, if the youngins know what a newspaper is. I worked for the UNM student newspaper, the Daily Lobo, and I'm gonna get a shout out to my buddy Isaac Avalusea. I don't know if he'll watch this. He works in Philly. Covered UNM athletics for 3 years there. Appreciated, did a year at the Journal. Had a pay-to-play position at 95.9, 610 AM, the sports animal. Did that for about 9 months, and then, found my way on the internet with my own company and my business partner, Eric Moulton. We have covered UNM athletics for the last 2.5 years. We are not a traditional podcast because of my background. We are now treated as a news outlet. I've done a lot of cool things in journalism. One of the, covering sports. I hate saying it like that. While I'm a college football guy through and through, and I love baseball. I love nothing more than losing money on college basketball. And I had the privilege of covering the college. I had a privilege of being in Cleveland for UNM's 2 games in the NCAA tournament. So that was a check there. But that's my background. Do this kind of full-time, part-time. I do have a day job when I'm failing as a stand-up comedic in the circuit. But I appreciate you guys having me on again. I'm excited because I can actually talk about UNM football right now, unlike last year when it was like, I don't know. So I throw the floor back to you guys.
All right, well, moving over to some Lobos football. And back-to-back seasons, the Lobos have a new head coach. This year, the Lobos have hired Jason Eck. Eck comes to New Mexico via Idaho, where he served as the head coach from 2022 through 2024. What can you tell us about Coach Eck and what he brings to the table for the Lobos?
Okay, I'm going to preface this. I am a Mountain West Conference fan. And I will start with Utah State because I had the privilege of meeting Danny Sprinkle on the basketball side and Jared Calhoun. Great guys. Jared Calhoun was the men's basketball coach there, is cool as hell. I am Mountain West Conference through as through. Jason Eck is the anti-Bronco Mendenhall. Hindsight is 2020, and I will get to your question just in a second. I thought that despite the fact that Bronco Mendenhall was the defensive coordinator during UNM's heyday under Rocky Long about 25 years ago, I felt it was such a weird hire. And UNM football can't get out of its own way. It like proverbially puts a shotgun to its foot and there's a wolf that pulls its trigger. I thought Bronco Mendenhall was a weird hire. And once again, I know I can say that a year and a half later. I've talked about that on our show, especially over the last 5 or 6 months, to answer your question. Jason Eck is phenomenal. I am a UNM alumni, and I have been negative Nancy, and I've been down on this department and program. And you both know, I think, my run-in with now Maryland head coach and New York Jets head coach wannabe, Mike Loxley, who ran the UNM football program into the ground. I am enthusiastic, not only about UNM football, but UNM men's basketball with Eric Olin. Patino was a program builder. I don't know if he was the best head coach. Jason Eck is a breath of fresh air, and including, I got to give a shout out to his associate head coach and special teams coach, Daniel DePrato, who I've talked to and had on our show. Energetic. Jason Eck just, I think, genuinely says and does all the right things. Within like the first month of being here, he was on campus doing videos of himself. It's, we want people in the stands. We need your support. He's very transparent, and I'm sure kudos to Sean, or excuse me, not kudos to Sean Ryder, but Sean Ryder of the Albuquerque Journal, who's the beat writer for UNM football, probably appreciates it. He's outgoing. He's somebody, you can sit down and have a beer with. He is everywhere and anywhere putting his face in the face of the program. I am excited. I look at the schedule and I go, oh, expletive, because it's a rough one. They were lucky that they avoided the Boise State and the UNLVs of the world last year. I'm enthusiastic. I hope that answered your question. I know I'm going to transition poorly, but I think this is the right hire, and we know I have a hat that says make your free throws from Barstool. I need to get the hat that says run the damn ball, because Jason Eck was a second stringer at Wisconsin for Ron Dane, 2000 NFC champion, your New York Football Giants. He was a rookie that year, but they're going to run the ball, and and once we get into the defense, I'm excited for that. But I think it's just exciting for the Albuquerque, and I hope, and the student body, and I hope that they show up this year and support this team. And it's last year of the Mountain West Conference. I pray that he wins, and I hope that in 5 or 6 years he's at a P5, whatever the hell it's going to be in 4 years, if there's a plan in 4 years, but a P4, and he's a head coach there, and he did not get fired here. He left on good terms and left the program in a good state. I hope that answered your question.
Well, Ryan, as it often happens when you get a new head coach, that means new assistants, new coordinators. New Mexico is no different in that regard. Coach Eck's has hired Luke Schleichner to be his OC. Coach Schleichner knows Coach Eck well, as he was his OC and quarterbacks coach at Idaho, and prior to that was with Coach Eck at South Dakota. Can you describe, I mean, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but can you describe the type of offense that Coach Schleichner plans to run there at New Mexico?
They're going to run the damn ball. They're going to play. This is going to be like, I'm guessing, and I could be wrong here, I think it's going to be like what you envisioned, 80s and 90s football, where you run the ball in the 70s and you play defense. I think the strength is going to be the defense. I don't want to go too deep into it. And I'm not harping on this team. I think there's some strengths. There's some big time strengths, and you guys know what they are. And then there's going to be some weaknesses. They returned Richard Pierce, who was a captain last year. They had an incredible offensive line last year. And the running back room is phenomenal. And you start with the name Scottre Humphrey, who was at Montana State last year. And ironically, if there was such a word, and if Alanis Morissette's song made sense, is Scottre Humphrey was on the week 0 team at Montana State that lost in the FCS title game. He was responsible for that fourth quarter comeback against Bronco Mendenhall's terrible defense. But last year, I mean, he had close to 1,400 yards. He ran for 16 TDs, and he averaged 7 yards a carry. Then they bring in a running back from Weber State, Damon Bankston. Great numbers, over 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns, over 6 yards a carry. And then they have another transfer from Sam Houston State. If you watch, Sam Houston State was pretty good last year. he had 97 carries for almost 500 yards. That's five yards a carry. And then Deshaun Buchanan from Idaho. There were some Idaho guys that followed. I don't know what they're going to do quarterback wise. And as we sit here in June talking about that, I mean, it's Jack Lane. I think they're going to use those running backs. And I don't know if it's going to be like 20, 25 years ago with the New England Patriots, running back by committee. I think if this team's going to be able to stay in games, they are going to keep the ball. They are going to run the ball. And I pray that it's going to be punch you in the mouth offensively and defensively.
Well, you talk about Jack Lane, so let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that is the quarterback. Last season, we were very excited for Devin Dampier, and boy, he did not disappoint. He earned first-team All-Conference honors in 2024. The 2024 success and coaching change means Dampier is now off to Utah as he followed offensive coordinator Jason Beck. Now the Lobos will look for a new quarterback to lead the team in 2025. You mentioned, Jack Lane kind of following the staff over from Idaho, looking like the probable quarterback one for the Lobos. For those that aren't familiar with Jack Lane's game, how would you describe it?
Well, he's been hurt, and they've been a little bit mum on it. I watch FCS, especially when it gets into that tournament. I love it. I think Jack Lane is kind of like your traditional quarterback. My understanding is it's elbow, but he will be good to go. James Laubstein, which I hope I said correctly, took a grunt of the snaps in the spring and the spring game, and there were some things that Jason X said he liked. But you have to think Jack Lane with Coach Slice, because I still can't pronounce his last name. Luke Slusen. I butcher it. I feel really bad. I used to have a segment on my show, my radio show. How can I butcher this UFC's name when we did UFC picks? But anyway, I don't, that one, I'm sorry. I guess I was wrong. I'm going to say, I don't know. I think that's the biggest question mark as we head into, Labor Day weekend in Ann Arbor. I don't know. There was a big hubbubaloo about the UConn transfer, which I thought was ironic that you have the UConn transfer. You have a basketball school transferring to another basketball school to play quarterback. He's like 6'7" and like, I don't know, 250. He's huge. 220, making him fatter than he is. I mean, he's only throw for 10 yards, but when you look like a tank and he's a freshman, I think he's going to be a sophomore this year. Or was a freshman. I don't know. I think obviously the position is Jack Lane's to lose. But I don't know. I don't know where we're going to be. You'll probably know more as we head into the late July, early August, what this offense is going to look like under Jack Lane. But yeah, he did miss, he missed the entire spring practice and did not play in the spring game. So I hope that answers your question there. I hope not to keep saying that, but yeah.
You say they expect Jack to come back. Have they given any kind of timetable? They expecting him to be back when fall camp starts, or?
That's my understanding. I would imagine probably closer to Labor Day, week 1, we're going to see and know more. Probably the clear cut number 2. If Lane's not ready to go, it's going to be Laubstein. Again, I mentioned Cole Welver, but 6'7", 220. I would imagine we might see. Let's see how that Michigan game goes. We might have somebody, one of those other 2 guys, the other transfer kid who I always forget his name, and I've got it up here.
Gabriel.
Gabriel Monchenbacher. His numbers are pretty decent from JUCO, but it would be Laubstein is, number 2. That's, I don't have any timetable with that being
Sure.
that it's kind of end of June here. That they've been open about a lot of things. They've been mum on that, and I can understand that.
How would you describe Laubstein's game or playing style?
From the little I saw, kind of like your traditional quarterback, he did run quite a bit. He had in one of the spring practices, he ran for a touchdown. I don't know why I'm going here, but Peyton Manning, Tom Brady kind of running, if that, puts that terrible look into your into your head. The spring game, Scottre Humphrey had a really good play. We have that video up on our website. I think it's kind of like your traditional, you're going to stop, you're going to drop back, you're going to throw the ball again. I think this offense is going to look a lot of pro style, where it's going to be running the ball, maybe some quick throws, 3-step drop. But I think he commanded the offense pretty well. Kind of to elaborate on that, one of the things that they did differently in this spring game was that it was a special point system. Like, it wasn't your traditional football game. And for UNM to have, and I got to preface this because I talk a lot. I've met Gabe Lopez, defensive end edge rusher for UNM. We've had Dimitri Johnson on our show, who was on that defense last year, came back. We've had Jason Eck's son, Jackson Eck, who was Big Sky All Conference last year, on our show. I like these guys. I want this defense to be like Rocky Long in its heyday. I think it's going to be a little bit different, but the defense won the spring game like 31-23 or something. So it was odd given how bad that defense was last year in the regular season. And I guess there's, a little bit of hope, moving forward, but I think the defense has got some keys, and I know we'll talk about that. The one thing, I'll wait for the defensive questions to get into that, but you guys didn't ask me about Devin Dampier, because he was such a phenomenal player. And I think that this team, besides the defense, and I'm not would've, could've, should've guy. You go back and look at 2024, they went 5-7. There was a realistic chance they could have been 10-2 and 9-3. And it blows my mind. They blew Wyoming. The Montana State game, they did that. They were in, I don't know what happened with Hawaii. I think there was a lot more behind the scenes. So, expletives weren't given. But realistically, like, it could have been a 9 or 10 win team had the defense stepped up a little bit. Dimitri Johnson, the linebacker, was the hero in the Utah State game. But it's, it was 2024 was an anomaly, but Devin Dampier was every bit advertised. And I was in New Jersey during the Washington State game because I went to the UNM St. John's game at the Garden the next day. So I fell asleep, woke up to losing a ton of money on BYU, and woke up to UNM, coming back from like 28-7 because I was on the East Coast. That game started at like 9 Eastern, and I tried, and I had to be on a train at like 8 a.m. the next morning. And I think that just shows what kind of special player Devin Dampier was. And I'm a big Kyle Whittingham guy. So I think, I've been listening to a little bit of pundits. One that Joe Klatt comes to mind. Utah State's like top 30, 35 team. I'm there. I'm going to keep a close eye on Utah. And I already like Kyle Whittingham. So I'm laser focused. I think there's some real potential for Utah this year, and Devin Dampier there.
And the Big 12 is always up in the air, so you never really know. But Ryan, if this team is just going to be smash mouth, they're going to run. I think maybe we should talk about the running backs. You got the trio of Eli Sanders, Naquari Rogers, Javen Jacobs. They've all hit the portal. This 2025 room will actually not have a single running back who had a carry for them in 2024 on this 2025 roster. This room has one redshirt junior and 4 transfers that make up this room. You talked about them earlier. Can you describe, how this room looked here in the spring?
Well, a couple guys were hurt, and Scottre Humphrey, who is probably running back number 1, despite it probably being running back by committee, is the bowling ball, and he's going to be number 1. The other 2 guys that I mentioned, in DJ McKinney, Deshaun Buchanan, and Davian Bankston, are they going to line up somebody at wide receiver? I don't know, just, to throw the defensive off. If you have 4 running backs that are potential number 1s, even at the FCS level, and I haven't thrown this out there, this team was described a couple months ago as a FCS all-star team. And if you guys look at the secondary and the D line and these running backs, I would imagine it's if they're all healthy and you're able to find games, especially late in the Mountain West, I would imagine they're all going to get touches. And I think, I would imagine Scott Trey Humphrey would be probably a first team all conference. And if he can replicate what he did, pending health, and if the offensive line is good, I think, I don't know. I hope that answered your question again. I know I'm saying that. I think the sky's the limit, man. I think that they're all going to share time, and it's going to be hard for defenses to stop.
We talked about using a committee, assuming they're all healthy. Buchanan and McKinney were out in the spring. I assume they'll be good to go or on track to good to go for the fall and summer.
I know one of them, Nick talked about it. They were both hamstrings, I think. They limited them because I think they know the potential. Again, it's kind of that lull before we get closer to July and end of July and August for camp. I would imagine they're going to use all four of them. And I'm going to, Schleichner, thank you for putting the notes how to pronounce it phonetically. X going to run the ball. I think they're going to run the ball. They're going to use all four of these guys, to give them a breather. But I think probably when it's crunch time, it's going to be Humphrey. I mean, I wouldn't see why not.
You talked about using, all these backs. Historically, it's been like a 3-back rotation. He's had 2 1,000-yard rushers, Pierre Strong in 2021 and Anthony Woods in 2023. And they've had a running back with double-digit touchdowns every year except for 2024. Do you expect the same here in 2025?
Are you talking about those guys at Idaho?
I'm talking about Coach Schleicher's just like how he deploys the running back. Is that what you're expecting? Are you expecting Humphrey to have a 1,000-yard rushing and double-digit touchdown kind of season?
I think Humphrey, I expect him to have close to 1,000 yards or 1,000 yards in a double-digit, touchdown season. I mean, if you've seen stuff, and I don't know for a fact, he's got to be, his NIL, they had to have paid the kid. And he's being deemed like, the number one transfer in the league in the Mountain West. I would say use him. He's just got other guys that can, lift that weight off. So I expect big things from him. I really do. And hypothetically, let's say it's not a good year. I expect him to be, the face of the offense. I think they're going to rely on him, especially when you've got questions at quarterback.
So you talked about him being a bowling ball, and we talked about other guys. How do you think that they'll be deployed? You got Buchanan, McKinney, Bankson there. How do you think that they get utilized?
I would imagine it's a rotation. The fact that you've got, again, an offensive lineman as a head coach, keep these guys fresh. You both know what Jason Eck did opening week last year, week 1 with Idaho at Oregon. It was like a 17-14 game late. I mean, I expect them to keep it close, in these, even in Michigan. I know that sounds bonkers. I expect them to keep it. I think they're going to utilize all these guys. Again, they did keep the offense kind of to a minimum, in my knowledge. And again, I didn't get to every practice. I went to a lot. It was kind of basic. So I think we're going to see a lot more. You'll learn, not answer the question. I think that's going to be things you're going to learn.
Well, let's move over to the wide receivers. And similar to the running back room, the portal did not leave much behind for the Lobos. 95% of the receiving production and all the touchdowns are gone. This room is highlighted by the return of Michael Buckley. He had 8 receptions for 103 yards in 24. The staff only brought in 2 transfers. So I would assume either A, they're believers in the guys that are coming back, or B, as we've alluded to multiple times, they plan to run the ball a lot. I think I know the answer to this question, Ryan, but which is it, A or B?
I mean, I think they plan to run the ball. As far as the wide receiving room goes, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're going to run the ball. I mean, how many times have I said that in the last 25 minutes? I'm gonna throw this stats to you. There's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wide receivers. There's 73 catches between them for over 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. So I think that answers that question for you. A lot of stink has been made of Keegan Johnson, the transfer from K-State. He is 6 foot, 185. He had 29 receptions last year for 359 yards and a touchdown. Isaiah Blair is the JUCO transfer. He has all the rest of the touchdowns at 6. You mentioned Michael Buckley is a great story, by the way, and Sean Ryder at the Journal wrote a great story about him. He grew up in Mexico. I think Cabo San Lucas. He's a phenomenal story. But yeah, I think they're gonna. And I know you're gonna ask about tight ends. There's a lot of questions there. But I would imagine these guys are gonna be blocking a lot.
Well, typically, even though his offenses do seem to run the ball a lot, he typically has one wide receiver that's like all the passing yards get funneled through. It's typically a guy that plays on the outside. They average, 119 targets, 81 receptions, almost 1,200 yards, and 10 touchdowns. If you had to pick one guy in that wide receiver room that you think can kind of perform similar, or kind of step into that role in a Eck offense, who do you think that might be here in 2025?
It's going to be Keegan Johnson. I think they're really high on him. I mean, the Isaiah Blair, you can never sleep on a JUCO transfer. Not that Isaiah Blair is probably Cam Newton, but it's going to be Keegan Johnson. Everything I've heard is that he can probably have a really good year. I think he would be the guy. And there's a lot of talk about him. And it's just not coming from within the football program. It's coming from other guys who cover the team. So I would look for him. I think it would be exciting to have him have a big year. You have a P4 transfer over to the, mid-major like UNM. I think he'd be your guy.
Well, you kind of talked about the tight ends earlier, and with the coaching change, what have you been able to learn in terms of how the tight ends will be utilized in this offense?
Well, they blocked a lot, and they had what was called, I'm going to butcher it, and it's a football term, like the 15-man or 12. I forgot what it was called. Dorian Thompson had a really good practice. There was one of the, I think the week before the spring game, the offense scored 4 or 5 touchdowns, and 3 of them were tight end receptions. Again, it's not a deep room between 4 guys. You've got 12 catches for 106 yards, but 3 touchdowns. That's Aiden Valdez at Campbell. Dorian Thompson, was at Arizona, so he kind of knows that big time football. I think these guys are going to be rotated, but I would look out for what I saw Dorian Thompson do in spring practice. He's probably going to be your guy.
Now they've got in these 5 transfers, and you talk about Dorian. Coach Eck, people may or may not remember, but he coached Tucker Kraft in 2021, and he had 84 targets. Without his stats in there, tight ends averaged 26 targets a season. Which end of the spectrum do you think Dorian is on that? More towards the 84 targets or the 26 in the season?
Probably the 26.
All right.
That's going to be run the damn ball.
All right. Well, if we're going to run the ball a lot, probably the most important thing is the offensive line. So let's turn our sights there. Via the portal or graduation, this line loses 4 of their 5 starters. Probably none bigger than first team all-conference left guard Baraka Beckett. This 2025 team will be anchored by right guard Richard Pierce and left tackle Tevin Shaw. Shaw was the starting left tackle but got hurt 2 games into the season. So while the Lobos lose 4 of their 5 starters, they do have some experience coming back. Plus, the staff added 4 transfers to the offensive line room. Ryan, what are your expectations for this group heading into 2025?
I think it's going to be the same thing as last year. I think they're going to run the ball. You've got a couple guys, that haven't played much. I mean, Isaiah Silliman was a tight end last year. It's a lot of freshmen. It's a lot of nothing last year. But I think Jason Eck and Luke Schleisner know what they're doing. It's a different core from last year, but I think Devin Dampier got sacked like once or twice. It was like through so many games. I don't know that stat off the top of my head, but they did a good job of Jason Beck and Bronco did a good job of protecting him. I imagine. I imagine this team I imagine this group to be not miss a beat, especially with Richard Pierce's, kind of leadership. I think this is going to be, along with the running back room, is going to be the strength of not only the offense but of the team.
Let's say at the end of the year, you're looking back and you're just like offensive line play. Wow. Who is the guy you think would be responsible for that?
It's easy. It's going to be Richard Pierce. He was a team captain. He started all 12 games last year. He played over 904 snaps. That was the most of any Lobo. 428 rushing plays, 75 passing plays. He did not let Devin Dampier get hit or sacked, and just allowed 6 hurries on those 470 some dropbacks. I think he's probably got pro potential. He is. I don't even think he's the unquestioned leader of the offensive line or the offense. He's probably the leader of this team. He's a name. If you are a mid-major football fan, you want to watch, and we see how this year goes. Where's the draft next year? Pittsburgh, right? I would look for his name to be called, next year in Pittsburgh.
Well, Ryan, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who would that be?
It's going back to, your questions from last year. How do I know? Well, I bought all 3 magazines this year, Athlon, 3 of them I already have, Athlon, Phil Steele, and Lindy's. And Athlon you can definitely put the new in New Mexico. I know I'm stealing that. It's new. I don't know. That's where the I don't knows come out this year because it's such a new team. I'm gonna go Dorian Thomas or Keegan Johnson. I mean, those guys. If you're paying any attention to this team, the Scott Trey Humphreys of the world, and the Jack Lane. But I would throw the tight end room or the wide receiver room with Dorian Thompson or Keegan Johnson.
All right, now let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And similar to the offense, we'll have his new defensive coordinator here for the Lobos. Spence Nowinski joins the team. He comes to New Mexico after serving as a defensive coordinator for Memphis. He spent each season since 2009 as a defensive coordinator. Can you describe the defensive scheme that Coach Nowinski plans to run here for New Mexico?
Well, I've been learning a lot about him the last week. I know he's a defensive line coach. He was the mid-major, some award. He was the mid-major defensive coordinator at Ohio. Like, it was kind of voted on by guys who cover mid-majors in 2023. I don't know the scheme. Well, there are a lot of things that we're going to change. But this defense should be the strength of this team. It's going to be, I think, probably like the offense where it's hard-nosed. I think it's going to be, if memory serves me correct, it's going to be, because they've got more secondary guys, it's going to be a 4-2-5. So you're going to have 5 guys in the secondary, probably a hybrid, somebody like Tavian Combs, who's been in Rocky Long, and Danny Gonzalez is, the 3-3-5. But I think there's some good, there's, we'll elaborate on the defensive line and the linebackers here soon. But, I think he's going to probably have to rely on some of those defensive linemen. And I was mentioning in the secondary, there's a lot of experience at FCS. I want to know how they can handle, if it's going to be more of those guys on the field, how can they handle, moving up to D1 and going to the Michigans and the UCLAs of the world. Look at what Boise State did last year. I know they're probably more known for Ashton Genty, but Maddox Madsen's going to be back, and I think they got a couple transfers in at wide receiver. Ricky White's gone, but I think you can still look for UNLV to be explosive, especially with Dan Mullen. So, I thought it's probably, they're going to probably rely on 4 guys trying to get pressure.
Well, Ryan, you're pretty high on the defense earlier, so let's dig into the guys up front on the defensive line. You talked about, creating pressure, but by way of graduation or the portal, this group sees 7 of their top 9 linemen in terms of snaps depart from the room. This 2025 room is highlighted by the return of edge Gabriel Lopez. The staff also added 4 transfers via the portal. Given those losses to the room, what are your expectations for this defensive line in 2025?
Gabe Lopez is a senior. He probably could have went anywhere else. He's a redshirt senior. He's an edge guy. I'm hoping it could be a breakout year for him. You add Keyshawn James-Newby from Idaho, and you have Xavier Slayton from Idaho. And you also get Brian Booker from Texas Southern. Those are your D linemen and edge rushers. I think it's going to start here. And with Spence Nowitzki's background with the D line and being a D line coach, I expect big things from these guys. I think it's going to be exciting to watch, and I think it's going to be the strength. I want to see how these 2 Idaho guys do, James-Newby and Slayton. I think if they can then up their game and move to this level, the record, or at least being in games, might be, they're going to keep UNM in games.
So, Ryan, let's get out your magic 8 ball. By year's end, a guy in this room has earned first-team all-conference honors. Who is it?
I mean, my heart would like to say Gabe Lopez, but it'd probably be Keyshawn James-Newby.
Well, Ryan, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here, but I think this linebacker room is not only the strength of this defense, but could be a strength of this team heading into 2025. The Lobos returned both starters from a year ago, and Dimitri Johnson and Randolph Capal. The staff only brings in 1 transfer. You talked about him earlier, coach's son, Jackson Eck. How did the linebackers look in the spring, and did anybody stand out for you?
Well, Jackson Eck was hurt, so he did not partake. Had Dimitri Johnson on the show. He's phenomenal. He was responsible for the Utah State win last year. He got an interception late in the game after UNM took the lead. And that college basketball score of like 51-48 or whatever it was. They looked pretty good. I mean, you've got 2 veterans, Dimitri Johnson and Randolph Kapai. Just to throw out there, between this, I was throwing out stats at you, and I'm not a big numbers guy, but occasionally it speaks out to me. You've got to, between the 5 guys, you've got to combine 268 tackles, 3 sacks, and 2 interceptions. I mean, I know that's not many interceptions. But as far as stats reach out, though, that's how they look. Again, in spring, what I saw, and the talking was a lot, was, what's this team going to look like in the fall because of the transfer portal? But I know you're going to get, a lot. I can't speak for Jackson Eck, but again, first team Big Sky. But I think Dimitri Johnson and Randolph Kapai, Dimitri Johnson played well. I would think, I mentioned Richard Pierce. This is going to be the premier group of this team, just not defensively. I think some things are going to change in the fall. Again, I don't think they were playing their entire cards, but I mentioned the spring game. They looked good. The defense played well. I expect, it's not answering your question, but I expect big things from this. If they are healthy, I expect big things from this room. I really do. I am excited between Johnson and Eck, and it's not a diss on Randolph Kapai, but I think if the Lobos defense is going to be, I talked about the D line, but if the Lobos defense is going to be stellar and remind some of us guys that were fans once, the Rocky Long days, kind of hybrid. I mean, I met some people from Chicago. I'm like, they're Bears fans. Where did Brian Urlacher go to college? And it's like, oh, snap, UNM. Play like that. And if you guys know this, he was safety here and he returned punts.
Ryan, I know there's multiple facets to the defense that produce numbers, but according to sportsreference.com, New Mexico's pass defense was ranked 107th of 134 FBS teams last season, allowing 252 passing yards per game. So it's either a good thing or a bad thing, but all the starters from 2024 have either graduated or left via the portal. Safety Derek Moore returns with the most snaps under his belt from 2024 with 160 over 5 games. I went to public school, so let's see if I, can add correctly. The staff has added 11 transfers, 8 of which were there in the spring. 11 of those 11 transfers, 6 will be, we'll call it, jumping up in competition. I feel like there's a lot of unknowns in this defensive secondary. So as we head into 2025, I'm a bit nervous. How do you feel about this room heading into the season?
Well, you texted me that before we came on the show, and at least I went by the stats and they're experienced. That's the way I look at it, because look at the offensive line. It could be hit or miss. I have faith in Nowinski. If you're questioning it, I have, there's a senior, a sophomore, a senior, another redshirt junior, and another redshirt senior with experience. I don't frown upon FCS, and I know you guys don't. And I think probably the casual fans like, oh wow, they went to Weber State. You can find diamonds in the rough there. Once again, and this is my fault. I didn't pay that close of attention to this group in spring. But what I see, and if you're going to play that 4-2-5, I see a lot. Luke, I'm sorry, I see a lot of experience on here. And I made the analogy to my business partner and co-owner, Eric Moulton. And I'm sorry I'm doing the New York Giants thing, but it was the first thing that resonated to me. I'm using the 2007 Giants. That secondary sucked. Corey Webster used to get beat up. Jabril Wilson was a great safety. You had Sam Madison, kind of the crafty veteran. Aaron Ross from Texas was a rookie that year. But because the defensive line, week 3, week 4, started to get there together, the secondary started to play well. I think if this secondary, because there's some experience and they're upperclassmen, what I foresee is them, if the defensive line and the linebackers can play well, I think the secondary can thrive. I really do. I like that experience. You're not throwing a lot of freshmen out there. These guys have played. I mean, Jaden Sheridan at Utah Tech, 48 total tackles. I mean, not a lot, you're not coming a lot of interceptions, but I mean, I see that, the Frankie Edwards, the third kid from Weber State, Abraham Williams comes from Idaho. I personally see a lot of experience here.
I guess I'm not too worried about the experience, but more of like that jump up and going to the Mountain West, and how does that translate into,
well, and how do they
more
play
of like the unknown, the fear of the unknown, I guess, is more of
no, that's true. And do they play well together? That's another question. This landscape now in this day and in 2025 is makeshift, but I hope it's a lot of senior leadership and guys who have experience and they can, but yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And I think chemistry, do they play? I mean, not to harp on last year, and it's almost nearly a completely different group. The defense was terrible last year. It was like 130th overall at 133 teams, which made no sense with Bronco Mendenhall. And again, growing up here, when Rocky Long kind of turned the tide where football was the thing as opposed to basketball, his teams, and you can go to our channel, the Pit Press. A lot of teams, they punched a lot of teams in the mouth. They beat Texas Tech. They beat Missouri on the road. We have you guys know who Luke Wysong is. His younger brother's on the team. Luke's a wide receiver at Arizona. He's been on our show. His uncle Ben played kind of the Lobo back linebacker. He comes on our show. And we've had a kind of a influencer who's a chiropractor, Bo Hightower, on the show. We've had Ian Clark, who went to Highland High School in Albuquerque, played for UNM. All these guys have said, we might not have won, but you sure the hell we're going to fill it the next week. I hope that's what this secondary and this defense can do.
Ryan, is there anyone that kind of stands out to you in this room as a whole that this defense will lean on for that experience that you're talking about?
Are you, are you talking about the secondary or the defense as a whole?
The secondary.
I don't know enough about it. You might go to the safeties. Somebody like Tavion Combs, who's a senior, he's been here. Poor guy, injury ridden. Didn't play a lot last year. Didn't play a lot in 2023. Austin Brawley played at Ohio. He's going to be a senior here. So he probably knows Spence Nowinski. I'm banking on probably those two guys as opposed to the new corners, the new secondary that's coming in. I know that David Murphy, and I'm going to show my age here. Every time I hear Murphy, I got to say RoboCop like Murphy. He's a local kid from Cleveland and Rio Rancho. There's a suburb of Albuquerque that's Rio Rancho, and they have two high schools, Rio Rancho and Cleveland. Cleveland's like a D2 facility. Like you just look at it and it's like, it's West Texas. They produce a lot of football players. So David Murphy's a Cleveland grad. I expect they've Eck, and I think Nowinski has spoken a lot about his play in spring. That's the one guy I can comment on. They're looking for him to do big things. So I would say Tavion Combs is, if he's healthy. You guys know that name. You follow mid-major. I'm happy he came back. He's somebody I'd look out for, other than in the cornerback room. But as a secondary as a whole, I think it would probably be Tavion Combs and then Brawley.
All right. Well, just like on the offensive side, if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2025, who you got?
It's no disrespect to Tavion Combs, Gabe Lopez. He's stuck around 3 head coaches in 3 different years. He's come from Wazoo, so he was in the Pac-12. I would love to see him get 5, 6, 7, 8 sacks. I would love to see that. I would love to see him have a breakout year. And I'm going kind of with that veteran type mentality. I would love to see him do it. I think it would be perfect for him to do it. Secondary honorable mention, and again, it's no disrespect, is Tavion Combs.
All right, Ryan, we've talked about offense, defense. Let's move over to the special teams. How are those units looking, and are there any concerns heading into summer and the season?
Well, as far as punter goes, they had to replace Aaron Rodriguez, who was actually going to nursing school. He already has his bachelor's and was finishing his nursing degree at UNM last year. He was kind of considered a really good punter. I don't know what he's probably, and I think his girlfriend was going to med school at UNM. UNM's actually got a really good med school. So you have to replace him. Luke Drzwicki comes back as a kicker. We had him on our show. You can go check that out. He is the place kicker. They also brought in somebody else from Montana, Grant Glasgow. Luke Drzwicki, I believe, is a senior. Yeah, he's graduating, so he'd be a senior. I think he just graduated. He had another year of eligibility with a degree in economics. I recommend both of you. I'll have to send it to you. Go listen to him. He was awesome. They treated him after the spring game. They had a hammer, UNM, and Eck gave it out, and they gave it to Luke Drzwicki. They gave it to the kicker. And then I mentioned Daniel DePrado, the associate coach, special teams coach. They surprised him. I think he's approaching this year trying to be the best possible kicker he can be. He's, PAT doesn't have an issue. He was 72% last year, 13 of 18, 45 was his longest make. If this team wants to be in games and they keep it close and defensive punch you in the mouth, which we don't really see anymore in college football or the NFL, they might have to rely on Luke Drzwicki. And I think it would be a phenomenal story if this kid was given a scholarship in the spring and had a stellar season and had a very good, outlook and a very good season field goal wise. I would look out for him. Other than that, it's a couple new guys. It's, you have to replace, like I said, Aaron Rodriguez, and you have to, you got to rely on Luke Drzwicki, but he's been there and done that. So I think special teams is going to be all right. And you've got, I think, a great head coach who just pours enthusiasm. If you guys don't follow him on Twitter, go follow Coach Daniel DePrado, DAP, space PRATO, and anybody who likes mid-major football. I recommend going and following him.
Now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning as we head into 2025?
Quarterback. Definitely quarterback and wide receiver. I think the rest of the team is okay. I think the linebacker room, the running back room, you guys know. The quarterback room. I want to know because I think Jack Lane was hurt last year for Idaho. So I want to know what kind. And then who was the wide receiver? His name's escaping me last year. He was awesome for Idaho last year. It starts with anyway. I'm interested to see how this quarterback room does, and especially for the fact, UNM is not a football school. Brian Urlacher is the claim to fame. Robin Cole played with the Steelers in the 70s. He won Super Bowl 13 and 14. Dontrell Moore was a phenomenal running back. He was featured on a documentary 20 some years ago. He's a friend. He comes on our show. He's from Roswell. He's not crazy. Played at Roswell High. He was a phenomenal player. He got hurt in an Emerald Bowl against Navy in 2004. And you can look it up. He got his knee hit, and that was kind of his career. He's with the Jets Titans practice squad. It's far few in between players, great players that come here. Devin Dampier probably had the greatest year of any UNM football player last year in a 5-7 season. I mentioned earlier, UNM football can't seem to get out of its own way. Thank God for Fernando Lovo. He comes from UT Austin. How do you replace that? How does Bronco Mendenhall replace that? I'm not talking, expletive here. How does he replace that? Because he's not walking through the door. I am concerned about the quarterback room. Since I've been, I'm going to be covering this football team intensely this fall. We'll be in Vegas for Mountain West Conference Football Media Days 3 years in a row. But the kid from UConn, he's big. I'm concerned about the quarterback room, and that could be if everybody else is able to play well, and if everybody else doesn't play well, like this could turn into a disastrous season. A lot of people, national pundits have UNM pick last, and I would probably base it off the fact that there's a big fat Jim Carrey Riddler question mark on the quarterback room. And I'm sorry for all my pop culture references, but yeah, I'm concerned about the quarterback and maybe who's going to throw the ball to any of these tight ends, or I'm concerned about the tight ends and the wide receivers. I listed the stats for you guys.
Well, Ryan, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, the transfer portal, I know Coach Eck has only been there for a little bit, but how has that changed New Mexico's recruiting philosophy?
Well, you all know what happened, 2 Fridays ago with the revenue sharing. We, a friend of our show, an amigo of the show, is Kurt Roth, who is the founder and president of 505 Sports Venture Foundation. Kurt Roth, I've tried to remain an objective journalist. I really like Kurt. He's done a lot. He is the reason, and it's kind of funny to say this. He's one of the big reasons UNM basketball was up 10 on Michigan State in the second round. You guys know who Donovan Dent was. I'm sure you guys watch a lot of mid-major basketball. I didn't give enough credit to Nelly Jr. Joseph, the center. True Washington was good. I know I'm talking basketball. I think Devin Dampier was a reason he was here last year. Javen Jacobs, Luke Wysong, and Luke, by the way, because Ben's a friend of the show, a friend of our show. Luke got his degree. Luke got a bachelor's and master's at UNM, and he had another year and he went to Arizona. I can't blame the kid. I think he's probably, if he has a stellar year, he's probably a draft pick. Like he's like Wes Welker and Edelman. I need to take my crazy pills because I'm talking very positive about Lobo football. Kurt, with the revenue sharing, things have changed the last week or two. I know that UNM needs help, and Kurt is on the forefront. And I think that you have somebody like Jason Eck, his associate coach. You have Fernando Lovo, the new AD. Football's a priority. Ryan Berryman is an associate AD. I know him. He's kind of in charge of the financial stuff. He's phenomenal. There's a youth movement over there. I'm older than Fernando Lovo. So I think that there is this genuine, if I can use another World War II analogy, you are getting ready to invade, and you have or a metaphorical hurricane that is building. And I can't go into specifics because one, I don't understand it. And two, there's a lot left to be, I think, discussed and talked about. But when you, and I know your listeners and you guys don't know him, but when you have somebody like Kurt Roth and a Mackenzie Bishop, these two guys that are forefront of 505 Sports Venture Foundation and the Lobo Club, you guys see what it does for basketball. There is, I'm from Albuquerque, and I grew up in, of all places, Central New Jersey, like two polar opposites. And when I worked in New York for CBS Sports, and I told people I was a UNM alumni, I'm working with a bunch of sports guys. What do you think the first thing that came up was? The Pit. You guys see it on TV. It's phenomenal. And during the Rocky Long days, football was like that. I hope this answered your question, because I went on a tangent and I was trying to show energy for Kurt and what he's done. I think there is an emphasis, a big emphasis, especially when you have character guys, high character, charismatic guys and high quality guys like Eck and like his coaching staff. They're all about it. But again, I'm not going to speak to it because the house revenue, it's over my head. I have a friend, Nick Nunez, that comes on our show. He's a lawyer. He's kind of on top of it. My business partner, Eric's on top of it. I think they want to be a football school. Now, to end this, my long, incoherent rambling that's made everybody dumber. Everybody leaves the Mountain West next year. What if Jason Eck's done a lot more with less? Can they turn into a power starting in 2026?
Well, in their short time there at Albuquerque, how do you feel the staff has done navigating the portal?
I mean, once again, look at the running back room. I think Scottre Humphrey alone, when I saw he signed here, my jaw hit the ground. And the D lineman Newby, James-Newby. I mean, these, it doesn't matter at what level. Scottre Humphrey played for a national championship last year. I think they've navigated the portal really well, other than the wide receiver room, but I think they've navigated the portal really well. But again, like I said, they're high on Keegan Johnson. Simply put, I think they've done a good job. I mean, it's not nepotism. Jackson Eck is an all-conference player, and the Ecks don't come across that way. I think his father knows what kind of player he has, and he has the privilege to play for his father. I think they've done a damn good job. And Rome wasn't built in a day, so I think give them a year or two. I think there's an even bigger question mark, my big fat Jim Carrey Riddler question mark on this season as opposed to last season. Because it's just new. Last year you had guys returning, and you had somebody who, and it's not like Eck isn't proven. Bronco Mendenhall was proven, but as I now had dubbed myself Ramblin' Ryan, I think they've done a good job. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there again. I think they've done a good job.
What do you think the main strength of this team is going to be in 2025? You talked about running the ball. You talked about the defense. If you had to pick between the two there, what do you think is the main strength?
Can I throw a curveball at you? I don't think this team's ever going to give up. I think this team will fight. And I think that is going to be their strength. The end of the game score might say different on August 30th in Ann Arbor. I think they're going to come out and try to throw a haymaker at Michigan. And I think it might be, there's things going on there. And what is it, Underwood? He's going to, is he going to start? I saw some headline. I think this team will not quit. And I think they're here to build something. And I would say that is going to be their strength, and they will fight until the final second of the fourth quarter. Now, if you want an actual football thing and not me being, Rudy or Al Pacino, it would be the running back room and the D line I think the defense is going to be pretty good. Everything I've learned about Spence Nowinski and I think this core with experience, I think the defense is going to be pretty damn good. I'm personally banking on this defense being good because, like I said, I guess I'm being nostalgic, which is a very niche thing to do and be nostalgic about, but a Lobo defense that punches you in the mouth.
What does success look like for the Lobos here in 2025?
I'm glad you asked that question. Okay. I'm going to reference a good friend of mine, who really doesn't watch a lot of college football nor UNM, but big NFL guy, big sports guy. He's got his calendar marked anytime they play New Mexico State, and he's got to have like 20 beers, even though we're pushing 40. He's got to do that. And I got to go look at the schedule because I'm getting my dates mixed up. I know when I go to Michigan and Ann Arbor. I know when I go to Ann Arbor, and I know when I go to UCLA. New Mexico State, and then why did they change? Good God, ESPN. I'm sorry, I got to go Lobos. It's the New Mexico State game and the Utah State game. You guys know why with the Utah State game. But September 27th and October 25th, and both those games are in Albuquerque this year. Hypothetically, you go 2-10 and you win those two games, it's a successful season. I think they're going to beat Idaho State. I think what success looks like this year, they have to beat New Mexico State. It's not Jerry Kildare anymore. That was a good run. All credit in the world to Tony Sanchez, because I'm a UNM alumni who says when New Mexico State's good, it's good for business. And October 25th, when Bronco Mendenhall and Utah State come rolling into Albuquerque. This is a basketball school. People still haven't forgiven Steve Alford here. But boy, their people were mad. People were pissed off about Bronco. So I think those two wins and a third win against Idaho State can right the ship. You don't play Wyoming this year. You got to go to Boise and UNLV. I don't know if you could steal one of those. I don't. Air Force, I always trust Troy Calhoun. Long-winded answer again. Beat Utah State and beat New Mexico State. It'll be a successful season.
Well, Ryan, we've covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything else that you want to share or think that we should know about this 2025 New Mexico Lobos football team?
If you are a fan of this show and you watch mid-major football, and there's an upset, obviously watch out for Jason X moves, because if you saw him in the Wyoming locker room last year, he could dance. I forgot what song it was to. So look out for that. I would take note of this coaching staff. I really would. I've normally never said that in the years I've covered college football. But lastly, before I let you guys know, I hope you guys pay real close. I can't believe I'm saying this. I hope you pay real close attention to this football team with Eck and this coaching staff. I know there's no Devin Dampier, but I'm going to harp on it. The running backs and the linebackers. I think it's going to be. They will be two key groups to watch. And I think there's some winnable games on the schedule. The schedule doesn't do them any favors, but hey, that is why you play the game.
Well, thanks again, Ryan. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. Until the next time, we are the G55.